So as campaigning has begun for the 2013 election, there's some key messages that each party are using in their speeches, and it reflects really where they stand on their policies between a fair system and adequate standards. And they're actually quite different. You may not think so at first, but as we listen particularly to representatives from the Greens speak about the issue, you can hear that their focus lies very clearly with the standard of care and processing for people transferred to Nauru or PNG. There's a strong emphasis on compassion. That word is being used very commonly, and repeated use of the words such as gulag in PNG or cruelty in relation to the processing arrangements in PNG and Nauru. And so the appeal that the Greens are focusing on is to elicit an emotional response from us, to very clearly say that this is not right, that people are suffering within this system. But there's not a lot of talk from them at the moment about the fairness of a system and how it could be created to be more fair for people across the region and indeed across the world. When we listen to representatives from the Labor Party speak about, predominantly for them, its plans to do with PNG and to deal with Nauru, and of course what we now know is either permanent settlement or long-term stay, as has been reduced in the case of Nauru. There is a mix of messages around standards and fairness, regardless of what you may think about transferring people to PNG and Nauru. In their speeches, they do refer to the standards. There's an acknowledgement that the conditions for the care of families and unaccompanied minors in PNG is not yet established. But there is a firm commitment for them to establish those conditions so that they can send families and unaccompanied minors. But they are talking about the fact that more needs to be in place. There's also a deal, or some sort of deal, that they are talking about quite repeatedly in the way they speak in their campaigning. And it does touch on the issue of fairness. Now, I want to say touch because there's a lot about the approach from the current government that is very challenging and regrettable. So the issue of fairness is around this deal, and they're saying that if the operations in PNG and Nauru does reduce the numbers arriving in an unauthorised way by sea, then they'll consider increasing our intake, our humanitarian intake of refugees. At the moment, it's at 20 because there was an increase, and they're talking that they may increase that to around 27,000. When we listen to representatives from the coalition speak about plans for their capacity of Nauru in particular to take up to 2,000, they're also talking repeatedly about stopping the boats still or stemming the flow. But really, in the way at the moment the coalition are talking about the issue, there's no reference to standards of care or processing, or even fairness. There's a strong commitment to ensuring that people don't reach Australia in the first place, but not a lot of discussion about what might happen in terms of processing them in, say, Indonesia or in Malaysia or in other countries in the region. So each party, of course, and I encourage you, and Misha may do the same thing, to have a look at the policy of the party that you are likely to vote for, and have a look at the detail of their policy, because of course there is much more detail from each, most parties. I'd suggest the coalition doesn't have too much detail in their policy other than not allowing them to get here in the first place. But those snapshots or those grabs that we're hearing in the campaign do reflect a bit more about where each party is coming from.